Good morning, students. Today we will see overview of paper 2 physiology. So in paper 2 we have CNS special sensors, CVS cardiovascular system, and RS respiratory system. So in CNS, first the basic unit you should know, that is neurons, and how they communicate with other neurons, that is through the synapse. And the next is the reflexes. So reflexes is an involuntary response to a stimuli, and this reflex contains an afferent neuron and efferent neuron, which is synapsing in the center. So when you elaborate the properties of synapse, that will be applicable for the property of reflexes also. Like some common properties I will tell for both synapse and reflexes. One is the one-way conduction. So the impulses will be transmitted in one way, that you can write for synapse and also for the reflexes. Then fatigue, then synaptic delay. So there is a delay property both in synapse and the reflexes. Then summation, where we have temporal and spatial summation. Then occlusion. So these are some of the common properties, because synapse is a part of reflex. It's a part of the reflex arc. So you can write. And the types of reflex you have to elaborate. Next is the receptor. Receptor is a sensor located in the skin or located inside. So based on the location, we have enteroreceptor present inside the body, or exteroreceptor which is present outside the body or in the skin. And other type of classification is based on the stimuli. We have touch receptor, pain receptor, temperature receptors. And you have to write 5 properties. You have to read 5 properties of receptor, at least 5 properties, like the receptor potential, adaptation, what is adequate stimuli, and what happens when you stimulate the receptor, even if the sensory pathway, even if the receptor is not there, but if you stimulate the sensory pathway, the sensation will be felt to the location of receptor. That is the law of projection. Then each receptor leads to a sensory pathway, and when the action potential travels in that pathway, a type of sensation will be felt. That is labeled line principle, or Muller's doctrine of specific nerve energies. So these are some of the properties. And Wegener-Fechner law. Okay, the intensity of stimulus is proportional to the log of the magnitude of stimulus felt is proportional to the log of intensity of the stimuli. That is Wegener-Fechner law. So these are some of the properties of receptors we have to elaborate. Next, ascending tracts. In ascending tracts, we have to remember the 2 important tracts. One is dorsal column, which carries all the sensory input except crude touch, pain, and temperature. So crude touch is carried by the anterior spinothalamic tract, and pain and temperature is carried by the lateral spinothalamic tract. So these tracts are ascending. It carries the sensory input from the environment, from the periphery to the brain. The next is the descending tract, which carries the motor signals from the brain to the muscles for the action. So the very important tract here is the pyramidal tract, which starts from the cerebral cortex, 5th layer, and it ends in the anterior horn cells in the spinal cord. So here we have 2 terminology, upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. Upper motor neuron refers to the origin of the tract till its termination in the anterior horn cell. Lower motor neuron refers to the anterior horn cell, the spinal nerves, and the neuromuscular junction. That is lower motor neuron. And you have to thorough with the lesions. What are the features when there is a lesion in upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron? The next comes the cerebral brain structures. The top structure is the cerebrum, which is the big brain, which has 2 cerebral hemispheres, and it has 4 lobes: frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe, and it has functional areas in these lobes. So in frontal lobe, very important area is the area 4, primary motor area, area 44-45, that is Broca's area, and area number 6, it's a premotor area. And in the frontal lobe, we have the prefrontal areas 9 to 14, and these are connected more with the limbic system. And in the parietal lobe, we have the sensory areas 3, 1, and 2, and sensory association area 5, 7. So the 3, 1, 2, they receive the sensory input, all the sensory input uh, through the gate, that is thalamus. So through the relay station thalamus, they reach the final point of reach is the 3, 1, and 2 in the parietal lobe, located in the post-central gyrus. So in the occipital lobe, you have to remember the visual areas 17, 18, and 19. Here the primary visual area is the 17. In temporal lobe, you have to remember the auditory areas 41 and 42. And that is the area at the junction of parietal, occipital, and temporal, that is Vernix area 22, which is called the comprehension area or knowing area. And any lesion here, it leads to aphasia, that is inability to speak. So the speech disability. So we have various types of aphasia. One is the sensory aphasia, other one is the motor aphasia. So when there is a damage to the Vernix area, we have sensory aphasia. When there is a damage to the Broca's area, we have motor aphasia. So you read thorough about the aphasia. Then the little brain. Okay, that is the cerebellum, which support the cerebrum. It coordinates the movements initiated by the cerebrum. So we have divisions of cerebellum, mainly spinocerebellum, which controls tone and posture, vestibulocerebellum, which controls the balance and equilibrium, and the corticocerebellum, which is planning and programming of the movements. And here the question exam point of view is cerebellum is very important compared to cerebrum. Though it is a little brain, it has many functions like it coordinates the movement, it applies a brake for the movement, that is a dampening effect. It is important for the ballistic movement, dancing movements, and it is important for the alternate movements. And that's why any skilled process, the initiation, any skilled movement, the initiation is done by cerebellum, but the coordinated activity is regulated by the cerebellum. It's very important. So it's very strongly associated with cerebellum. And disorders, we have the mnemonic Simran, where we have scanning speech, intention tremor, motor dysfunction or ataxia, rebound phenomena, then adiadochokinesia, then nystagmus, in short. We have other features also. The next is the basal ganglia. Basal ganglia, you have to elaborate the parts of basal ganglia, like caudate nucleus, putamen nucleus, subthalamic nucleus, substantia nigra. So, basal ganglia it's called basal. It is a group of nuclei located below the big brain, subcortical structure, and the function wise, it is also coordinating the movements, smoothing the movements. And the lesion, important neurotransmitter is the dopamine. When there is a deficiency of this dopamine due to degeneration, it leads to a disease called Parkinson disease. Clinically, it's very important. So it is featured by a triad of symptoms, that is rigidity, tremor, bradykinesia. Then comes the other subcortical structures, two subcortical structures located below the cerebrum, that is hypothalamus and thalamus. Hypothalamus is a collection of nuclei, and you have to list out any 5 nuclei and their function. It's very simple. The very important nuclei are suprachiasmatic nucleus, controlling the circadian rhythm, supraoptic nucleus, secretion of vasopressin, paraventricular nucleus, secretion of oxytocin, then satiety center, that is ventromedial nucleus, then lateral nucleus, that is feeding center. So these are some of the nuclei in hypothalamus and their functions. and we have it is this head ganglion of the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. So we have the sympathetic centers and parasympathetic centers. The anterior nucleus is parasympathetic and the posterior nucleus is sympathetic center. Then above this hypothalamus, we have the thalamus. So thalamus is mainly a sensory relay station. I told you all the sensors reaches the thalamus through the ascending tracts and then they go to the cerebrum. Okay, so from thalamus they go to the cerebrum, sensory area 3, 1 and 2. So thalamus is a sensory relay station except for olfaction. So olfactory fibers will not relay through the thalamus. And you have to list the 5 nuclei. So apart from sensory, the major function is sensory, it is concerned with motor also. So here the ventroposterolateral nucleus is very important sensory nuclei. Then we have the motor nuclei. Then we have the thalamus's connection with the limbic system also. It is a part of the Papez circuit in limbic system. Concerned with learning, emotions, and memory. So read at least 5 nuclei and their functions. The next in the brainstem. Brainstem, usually we will refer to brainstem as midbrain, pons, and medulla. So throughout the brainstem, there is a collection of nuclei called reticular activating system. The function is it mainly concerned with awake and arousal. So inhibition of this reticular activating system leads to sleep. Coming to sleep, we have two types of sleep, NREM sleep and REM sleep. So it occurs in cycles. So the major component is the NREM sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep, and a small percentage is the REM sleep, REM sleep. And NREM sleep is have 4 stages from light sleep to deep sleep. And this REM sleep is also called rapid eye movement sleep. So there are differences between NREM sleep and REM sleep, and please thorough with that part also. Then waves of ECG, we have alpha wave, beta wave, gamma wave and delta waves. And usually the delta waves are seen in deep sleep. Alpha waves are seen in arousal and meditative state. Theta waves are seen in hippocampus and it is common in children. So these are the some of the points regarding the EEG. EEG is electroencephalogram, that is recording the electrical activity of the brain. The next is the special senses. In special senses, there are 4 special senses. One is taste, olfaction, vision, then audition or hearing. In all the 4 senses, you have to thorough with the pathways. The taste pathway very simple, starting from the tongue, it reaches the medulla, that is nucleus tractus solitarius. The sensation from the tongue carried by the 7th cranial nerve, anterior 2/3 of the tongue, and posterior 1/3 is carried by the glossopharyngeal nerve, and posterior most part and palate it is carried by the vagal nerve. And all this reaches the nucleus tractus solitarius in medulla. From there it goes to the thalamus, then it reaches the gustatory cortex or the taste areas. The olfactory pathway is also very simple. It starts in the nose, in the olfactory receptor, goes to the olfactory bulb, then it leads to olfactory striae, then it leads to the olfactory cortex. But there is no relay in the thalamus. Visual pathway is start in the eye, in the retina. The signal is carried by the optic nerve, crossing in the optic chiasma, then it forms the optic tract, then it reaches the lateral geniculate body in the thalamus. Relay in the thalamus is there. Then it goes for the optic radiations. Then it reaches the visual area, that is occipital lobe or the visual cortex. And there are field effects. What happens when optic nerve is damaged, when optic chiasma is damaged, and optic radiations when it is damaged? So that you have to read. Then what happens when the light falls on the lens. These are the errors of refraction. Normally, parallel rays of light are brought to focus on the retina. If it is in front of the retina, what problem will occur? If it is beyond the retina, what problem will occur? So if it is in front, it is myopia. So use a biconcave lens and make it fall on the retina. If it is falling beyond the retina, use a biconvex lens. It is hypermetropia. So myopia and hypermetropia. So myopia is called short sight and hypermetropia is the long sight. Then we have other area of refraction, that is curvature of cornea when it is irregular, it is astigmatism, astigmatic error. Then due to aging, the accommodative power ability will be lost by the lens and inability to focus to the near object happens. That is called presbyopia. Then coming to color vision, here you have to know about the cones which are responsible for the color vision. And the very important point is you are measuring, you are able to test the color vision by Ishihara's chart. And there are color blindness, Tritanopia, red color blindness, Deutranopia, green color blindness. So this color blindness you have to have a idea. Protanopia is red color blindness, Tritanopia is blue color blindness, Deutranopia is green color blindness. Yes. And coming to the chemistry of vision, how the visual signals are converted into action potential. It happens in the rhodopsin. When light falls, there is changes in the rhodopsin to meta-rhodopsin 2, and this meta-rhodopsin 2 initiate chemical process that causes the generation of the neurotransmitters through hyperpolarization, and that neurotransmitters release causes the generation of the action potential, and through the nerves the action potential is transmitted and reaches the auditory reaches the visual cortex. So this is a nutshell regarding the vision. Coming to hearing, the mechanism of hearing, we should know the ear we have external, middle and internal ear. Middle ear we have ossicles, malleus, incus and stapes, and stapes rest on the cochlea. The cochlea you have the three components, the membranous labyrinth, media, tympani and vestibuli, and in the media, scala media, we have the basilar membrane where we have the organ of hearing which is called organ of Corti. So the organ of Corti will vibrate and that causes vibration of the hair cells, shaking of the hair cells, that causes depolarization, that generate the action potential, and this depolarization which is generated here is called the microcochlear potentials, and they are transmitted through the cochlear nerve, and here it leads to a pathway called auditory pathway. So from the auditory pathway, from the nerves, it reaches the it ascends, it actually reaches the medulla, and there'll be crossing over takes place, and it reaches the thalamus. In the thalamus, it enters the medial geniculate body, and from the thalamus, it goes to the auditory area 41 and 42. So the key areas are the pyral ganglia, which is located near the organ of Corti, then the trapezoid body that is located in the medulla, where the crossing of the fibers takes place, then the thalamus, that is medial geniculate body, then the auditory area. And you should know about the deafness and hearing test. What are the tests? We have the Rennie's test, Weber's test, Schwabach's test done. Deafness, we have two deafness, conjunctive deafness and central neural deafness. When there is any pathology in the external and middle ear, the deafness will be a conjunctive type. When there is a pathology, this is in the inner ear, it leads to a sensory neural deafness. Next is the cardiovascular system. So in cardiac system, very simple. Properties of cardiac muscle you should know. So properties means you remember just make cardiac muscle when the cardiac muscle has to contract. That is contractility of the cardiac muscle. And what makes a contraction? It is the contraction of the impulses. That is conductivity. You have to explain the conducting system, and which part generate, that is SA node, that is autorhythmicity. So autorhythmicity, conductivity, contractility, and the point here is the refractory period. So it is not responding to another stimuli when it is contracting. That is a refractory period. So these are some of the properties of the cardiac muscle. So two potentials you have to remember here, the impulses. One is the cardiac muscle potential, where we have the depolarization, little repolarization, a plateau phase, then repolarization. The plateau phase is very significant in cardiac muscle. No other action potential we have the plateau phase, and it's mainly due to the calcium influx. Pacemaker potential is a unit of the cardiac muscle, and here the pacemaker potential we have the slow depolarization. The part of depolarization, so the initial part it is automatically happening. Then we have depolarization upstroke, then repolarization. Here the role of calcium channels are very important. There is a transient calcium channel and long-lasting calcium channel that is responsible for the late part of the initial depolarization and depolarization. The beginning of the depolarization is mainly due to the potassium channel decay. So there is a decay of the potassium channel that causes depolarization to get retained. Because usually when potassium channel opens, what happens? There will be repolation has to happen. Here there is the potassium channel decaying is taking place, and that is the reason why it is called IK decay. There will be generation of the pacemaker potential. Then conducting system, I told you, SA node, AV node, bundle of his Ng fibers. Here, point to be noted is the AV node. So AV node delay is very important. It helps in the ventricular filling. Then what comes of the heart from the cardiac muscle? Cardiac output. You should know what is preload. That is the filling of the ventricle. End diastolic volume is called the preload. And what is afterload? So after the contraction, the heart is facing a resistance by the aorta. That resistance is called the afterload. So preload, afterload. So factors regulating. So usually the cardiac output is determined by heart rate and stroke volume. And here the stroke volume in turn determined by the end diastolic volume. So you should narrate about the factors regulating. And there are two mechanisms. One is an heterometric regulation, other one is a homometric regulation. Heterometric is change in the muscle fiber causing change in the cardiac output. That is explained by the Frank-Starling law. And homometric is, it's not depending on the changes in the length, and it is mainly depending on the afterload. Okay, that is the homometric regulation. And the heart rate. And measurement of cardiac output, we should narrate about the fixed principle. Coming to cardiac cycle, you have the phases of cardiac cycle: ventricular systole, ventricular diastole, and heart sounds. Systole, you have three phases. The total duration is 0.3 second. Out of this, so 0.8 second. Out of this, 0.3 systole and 0.5 is diastole. If you remove 0.3, there are three phases here. One is isovolumetric contraction, rapid ejection, and slow ejection. The diastole, I told you 0.5 second, 5 phases. Protodiastole, isovolumetric relaxation, first rapid filling phase, and the last rapid filling phase. Then heart sounds. What are the causes for the heart sounds? Coming to blood pressure, you should define the blood pressure. What are the factors determining the blood pressure or variations happening, and how it is regulated by short term, mainly by the baroreceptor, chemoreceptor, and CNS ischemic response. Intermediate response, intermediate regulation done by the capillary fluid sheet mechanism and stress relaxation mechanism theories. Then long-term regulation is done by the kidneys. Here the baroreceptor reflex is very important, exam point of view. Then hypertension, I have given bold letter because it's one of the integrated topic. So yeah, question will be come from the hypertension, ischemic heart disease, because these two are the integrated topics in the paper 2. So hypertension, you read everything about hypertension. The regulation of heart rate, how sympathetic causes activating of heart rate, parasympathetic cause a decrease in the heart rate. These things you have to be thorough. Then shock. There are 4 types of shock: hypovolemic shock, uh, neurogenic shock, then cardiogenic shock. So these are some of the types of shock. Hypovolemic is mainly due to the hemorrhage, okay, low blood volume. Neurogenic is due to the neural elements causing vasodilation. Then cardiogenic shock, the heart is not contracting properly. That is cardiogenic shock. So these are some of the types of shock. Then ischemic heart disease. Here, this heart disease is caused due to the low blood flow to the heart, and you have to be thorough with the coronary circulation and what are the ECG changes occurring in the ischemic heart disease. So ECG, you be thorough with the leads and the waves. So we have 12 leads. Out of the 12 leads, 3 leads are limb leads, 3 leads are augmented leads, and 6 leads are chest leads. What are the waves? P wave, atrial depolarization, QRS ventricular depolarization, and T wave ventricular repolarization. Coming to respiratory system, starts with the Weber lung model, how the trachea is divided into bronchi, bronchiole, and up to the terminal bronchiole. It is just conducting the air, conducting zone. And after the terminal bronchiole, we have the respiratory bronchiole and alveoli that constitute the respiratory unit or respiratory zone. And this was explained by the Weber lung model. Then mechanics of respiration, thorough with the muscles of inspiration and expiration. And there are 2 movements. One is the bucket handle movement and pump handle movement. Bucket handle increases transverse diameter, pump handle increases the anteroposterior diameter. And what are the pressure changes? The change in the intrapulmonary pressure and change in the intrapleural pressure. How this change is going to cause expansion of the lung. So that was explained by the mechanism of inspiration and expiration. So first there will be movement of the chest wall that causes changes in the intrapleural pressure, and that causes a suction effect, expanding the lung and fall in the pressure inside the lung, so that air will come from outside to inside automatically, and that causes inflation of the alveoli. So this is in nutshell the mechanism of inspiration. The reverse takes place in expiration. Expiration is an elastic recoiling of the lung. It is a very passive process. So this expansion, you call it as expansibility, you are calling it as compliance, given by delta V by delta P. The compliance of both the lungs is 200 ml per centimeter of water. Per centimeter of water change in the pressure. So delta P refers to the change in the pressure or the pressure difference between the intrapleural and intrapulmonary. Delta V is the change in the volume. Then the volumes and capacities. The volumes and capacities are stated by spirometer, and we have 4 volumes and 4 capacity. Tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, residual volume, then expiratory reserve volume. Capacities, we have total lung capacity, vital capacity, inspiratory capacity, functional residual capacity. Then dead space. Dead space is the conducting zone where the air is just conducted. There is no exchange with the blood. And we have anatomical dead space and physiological dead space. Then ventilation perfusion ratio, how the mismatch is taking place. So there are 4 liters of air is entering the alveoli and blood flowing is 5 liters. So 4 by 5, that is the ratio, ventilation perfusion ratio. Then tuberculosis, this also be in dark, like hypertension, ischemic heart disease, and tuberculosis. HIT, HIT, okay, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, and tuberculosis. These 3 areas are integrated topics in paper 2. In these 3 areas, 2 questions will be asked in the short notes. So be thorough with these 3 areas. You can score 10 marks. And additionally, you have AdCom, that is ethics, communication. So that will have another 5 marks. So 15 marks is very easy to score in the theory paper. Hypoxia, there is low oxygen in the tissues. That is of 4 types. One is hypoxic hypoxia, then stagnant hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, and histotoxic hypoxia. Then there are two various conditions, two types conditions. One is a person who goes to high altitude, what happens? When the person goes to the deep sea, what happens? So this is high altitude sickness, where we have mountain sickness, and we have acute mountain sickness characterized by acute cerebral edema and pulmonary edema, and people staying in high altitude get acclimatized to the high altitude. That is called acclimatization. What are the changes happening in their body? For example, their RBC count will be very high, their ventilation rate, the respiratory rate will be very high. So these are some of the adapting changes in the body that was explained by acclimatization process. Then deep sea divers, when they go for deep sea and when they are coming back, they face a compression sickness called decompression sickness or Caisson's disease. And how to prevent it? They have to ascend slowly from deep sea to the sea level. And this Caisson disease is also called diverse palsy or dysbarism. Here, the nitrogen comes out of the bubbles and it causes pain in the joints and causes choking in the lungs.